The Butcher cover, the Beatles' most controversial photo shoot. In March 1966, the Beatles posed for a photo shoot that shocked the world. A photo so bizarre, grotesque, and unexpected, it was pulled from shelves and almost erased from their legacy. But what really happened? Was it a protest, a prank, or something far deeper? Today, we reveal the truth behind the infamous Butcher cover, the most controversial photo in Beatles history. On March 25, 1966, the Beatles arrived at a Chelsea studio in London known as One the Vale, a top-floor space often used by photographer Robert Whitaker. That day, they were scheduled for interviews with international journalists, a Brazilian correspondent, an Indian reporter discussing sitar music with George Harrison, and Tom Lodge, a DJ from Radio Caroline. Lodge's interview was later released as a special flexi disc called Sounds of the Stars, inserted in an issue of Disc and Music Echo, a magazine co-owned by Brian Epstein. But the real story of the day? It wasn't about interviews. It was about a photo session that took a wildly unexpected turn. Earlier that day, the band posed for a conventional photo shoot with photographer Nigel Dixon for the Beatles book. Wearing dark jackets and turtlenecks, these portraits became their standard promotional images for 1966. But what happened next was anything but standard. Robert Whitaker, known for his surrealist style, had something radical in mind. He wasn't interested in bland PR images. Inspired by Hans Bellmer and Merritt Oppenheim, he envisioned a three-part artistic piece titled A Somnambulant Adventure. It was meant as a visual critique, exploring the absurd mythologizing of the Beatles and the artificiality of fame. What emerged was shocking. The Beatles in butcher's coats, draped with raw meat, doll parts, glass eyes, and false teeth. It wasn't a joke, it was art. Whitaker intended it as a metaphor for public idolatry, how the world worshipped the Beatles as gods rather than as human beings. There were multiple photos, each packed with meaning. One featured the band holding sausages in front of a surprised woman, symbolizing an umbilical cord, connecting the Beatles back to shared humanity. Another showed George Harrison hammering nails into John Lennon's head, a commentary on how people projected godlike status onto them, when in truth, they were just men. A bizarre outtake had Ringo Starr emerging from a cardboard box labeled 2 million, a nod to the overwhelming commodification of their identity. Whitaker's final plan? To frame the images in gold, surround the Beatles' heads with jeweled halos, and present them like Russian religious icons, a surreal critique of their divine treatment. But Whitaker's project was never completed. Instead, Capitol Records in the US took the most shocking image, the butcher coats and raw meat, and chose it for the cover of the upcoming American album, Yesterday and Today. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Retailers were furious. Fans were confused. The media called it grotesque. Capitol scrambled to recall over 750,000 copies, launching Operation Retrieve, and replaced the image with a safe photo of the band around a steamer trunk. Ironically, that too was shot by Whitaker. Rumors swirled. Was this a protest against Capitol for butchering UK albums in the US? Whitaker and even members of the band denied this. This wasn't about record labels. It was a dark satire about fame, worship, and identity. Whitaker compared it to the biblical story of the golden calf, where Moses returns to find people worshiping a false idol. To him, the Beatles had become that idol. John and Paul later admitted they were frustrated and bored with fame, and saw Whitaker's concept as a way to express something deeper. In truth, the Butcher photo wasn't meant to stand alone. It was part of a much larger visual narrative, but that context was stripped away. What was intended as an art piece became a media nightmare. Yet over time, it transformed into something iconic, a collector's item worth thousands, a symbol of rebellion in pop culture, a crack in the Beatles' polished image, a moment of brutal honesty. Like the famous photo of Christine Keeler in 1963, the Butcher cover became larger than itself. It was no longer just a photo, it was a flashpoint in music history. Some saw it as grotesque, others brilliant, but above all, it was real. It reminded the world that behind the fame and screaming fans, the Beatles were four flawed, restless, and deeply human men, trapped in a myth of their own making. Today, the butcher cover is more than a controversial photo. It's a reminder of the cost of idol worship and the power of art to disrupt, even in the world's biggest band. What do you think? Artistic masterpiece or PR disaster? Like, subscribe, and share for more rare Beatles stories.